I can't stop smiling, man. Hey, I can't stop smiling, man.
God, we thank you, Father, for the support. Look upon the father, the mother, the sister, and the brother, his family.
I'll never get over this. I'll never get over somebody doing this to my niece.
On the evening of June 27, 2023, a popular rapper was shot dead after he liked a picture of his friend's wife on Facebook. Just moments later, the Lumberton police received 911 calls that led them to the 100 block of Beam Road, west of Lumberton, North Carolina. And when they arrived at the scene, they were met with something devastating. 21-year-old Tazari Butler was found collapsed on the ground, riddled with multiple gunshot wounds. First responders rushed to his side, but it was already too late. The promising young rapper known as Lil J-Bo, a father of two and a rising voice in Lumberton's music scene, had been silenced.
All that fake it. Let shit out behave. If it's personal, don't bluff, niggas say it. Niggas plot, on wait.
As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered the unthinkable. The man behind it all was his own friend, 26-year-old Chamberlain Lee Oxendine. But the disturbing truths did not end there. Each layer of the case revealed betrayals more haunting than the last. A betrayal so deep it turned friendship into tragedy, leaving behind a truth more chilling than anyone ever expected. This is the life and death of Tazari Lil J-Bo Butler.
Damn, that bitch ran back. Fuck it, it worked. It worked, man. Yeah.
Mullah pipe me up for this one.
Hey, nah, bro. This shit for real. This shit for real, bro.
His story takes us to Lumberton, North Carolina, a small city known for its tight-knit community and southern roots. But behind its charm lies a darker truth. Lumberton's violent crime rate is 164% higher than the national average. It is in this environment of hidden danger that Tazari's life would come to a devastating end. Tazari Amante Butler, better known in his community and in the music world as Lil J-Bo, was born on January 9, 2003 in Lumberton, North Carolina. He entered the world as the beloved son of Shauna Lowry and his father, whose identity remains unknown to the public. Tazari grew up alongside his twin sisters Azariah and Desire in the Turner Terrace apartments on the south side of Lumberton. The neighborhood was rough and unforgiving, shaping him early.
Terrace projects.
A nigga can die in a day. A nigga can die in a day. Like, you wake up in a given moment, coming up on that block, like, you can die in a day. Can't trust nobody, man. Yeah.
For sure. So how would you describe your childhood coming up?
It was tough, but it was a learning experience. I had to learn and grow up early, you feel me? So I learned a lot, especially me coming up as a youngin'. I always hung around the big homies, the big odds. So I'm coming up under my big brothers, watching them, looking at their footsteps, how they thugging, and so like, I was just like, damn, they thugging, they kicking, like, they hot, you feel me?
It was a place where survival required vigilance, where betrayal lurked behind familiar faces, and where children matured far faster than their years allowed. But as much as he tried to rise above it, the shadows of that environment would one day return to haunt him. Despite the challenges of his childhood, Tazari tried to carve out a normal life. He attended Lumberton High School, where he played both football and basketball for the Pirates. On the field, he was a running back, fast, agile, and determined. Coaches and teammates saw promise in him, but fate intervened during his junior year when a devastating ACL injury.
It really broke me inside, but it changed my whole mentality and the way I thought about sports. Because when I came back thinking I was gonna come back with a stronger mentality, you know, you gotta be built for it. And I ain't saying I was built for it, but it's just me seeing my team go out there and lose back-to-back on the football field. That shit broke me inside. So that's when I really started rapping, like playing around with the rap shit. I just started playing around with the rap shit. Then I dropped my first song. That was Soldier. I started taking it serious after that, after I seen how much love I was getting after that.
For many, such a setback would have been the end of a dream. For Tazari, it was just the beginning. Because what seemed like the loss of one future would unexpectedly open the door to another. With sports no longer an option, Tazari turned his focus toward music. What started as an outlet became his passion, his work, and soon his identity. By the age of 15, he was recording songs and building his name under the moniker Lil J-Bo. His raw talent and lyrical honesty resonated with listeners, pulling in crowds both locally and online. But this wasn't just about hobby or fame. It was about survival, about finding a way out. And slowly, the world began to notice. His career gathered momentum quickly. He released tracks that drew hundreds of thousands of views, collaborated with major artists like Lil Boosie on the song Soldier Mentality, and linked up with Memphis rapper CEO 30 for another project. His single Gangster Vibes collected nearly 250,000 plays, and his video Wonderful Feeling was filmed in Times Square, far from the streets of Lumberton that raised him. He even sat down with 50 Cent's team on the This Is 50 podcast, a major achievement for a small-town rapper trying to break through. For a boy from a town of 18,000, with more struggles than opportunities, these milestones symbolized something greater. They symbolized hope, but as his star began to rise, so too did the tension back home. Because no matter how far he traveled, Tazari remained rooted in Lumberton. He gave back to his community, mentored kids, and stayed close to his family. He was known not just as an artist, but as a humble and loyal man. And more than anything, he was a father. As his career took shape, so did his personal life. Tazari found love early, and it gave him something even greater to fight for. The name of his partner has not been made publicly known, but their relationship blossomed into a bond that anchored him during the chaos of rising fame. Friends and family remembered how devoted he became, not just as a partner, but as a father. Unlike the stereotype of absent young dads, he showed up. He played with his children, he laughed with them, and he made sure they knew how deeply they were loved. His daughters Chosen and Akhlani became his world. They were his motivation, the reason he worked long nights in the studio, the reason he pushed to break free from Lumberton's grasp. And to many, fatherhood seemed to soften him. It grounded his ambitions and gave him clarity. But as much as his children gave him purpose, the wider circle of friends and acquaintances around him began to fracture. Because in the world he lived in, loyalty was fragile. In small towns like Lumberton, especially in the rap scene, brotherhood could turn into rivalry overnight. The same friends who once sat at his table, laughed with him, and celebrated his victories could also be the ones to turn their backs. And while Tazari didn't realize it yet, the danger wasn't coming from strangers. It was building inside his own circle. As his name grew bigger, he eventually crossed paths with a man named Chamberlain Lee Oxendine, a 26-year-old from the same community. The two weren't enemies at first. In fact, they moved in the same spaces, shared connections, and for a time had the kind of familiarity that made them trust each other. In small towns, bonds like that can feel like family. But family, as Tazari would soon learn, doesn't always mean safety. At first, there was nothing unusual between them. They were young men carving out their own paths in a town that often gave little. But beneath the surface, something darker was starting to grow. What started as casual interactions slowly shifted into tension, a quiet unease that no one outside their circle could fully see. And soon, that tension would boil over. On the days leading up to the crime, there were rumors floating around as to where it all started. They said it came down to something so small, something that should have meant nothing. A simple Facebook like. Tazari had tapped the like button on a picture of his friend's wife on Facebook. To most of us, that wouldn't be a big deal. But in a small town where pride and respect carry heavy weight, even something that tiny can spark jealousy. For Chamberlain, it didn't feel harmless. It felt personal. And because it involved his wife, the situation wasn't just about social media anymore. It struck at his pride as a husband. Soon, what had once been a casual interaction between the two men started to sour. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into quiet arguments that no one outside their circle could fully see. But what started as a quiet grudge over something so small was about to erupt into a confrontation that would change everything. On the evening of June 27, 2023, everything fell apart. It was 9:08 p.m. when deputies in Robeson County were dispatched to the 100 block of Beam Road, west of Lumberton, North Carolina. A 911 call had come in from a nearby resident, reporting the sound of multiple gunshots echoing through the area. To locals, the difference between fireworks and bullets was clear. What they heard that night was violence. But when deputies arrived, what they found was far worse than the call suggested. A young man was down, struck multiple times. His body showed the kind of damage that left no room for doubt. Whoever pulled the trigger wanted to make sure he didn't walk away. First responders could only confirm what was already obvious. And then came the detail that stunned even the most seasoned investigators. The victim was none other than 20-year-old Tazari Luljabo Butler. The same young rapper who had been building his career step by step, the same father whose world revolved around his 2 daughters, the same son his parents worried about every time he walked out the door. As word spread, disbelief quickly turned to grief. Calls and messages flew across town, and social media filled with shock. In Lumberton, everyone knew who he was, if not through his music, then through his family, his friends, or simply because he was one of their own. To hear that he had been gunned down was almost impossible to process. But the pain of losing him cut even deeper when the truth began to surface. This wasn't a random act of violence, and it wasn't the work of a faceless stranger passing through. The betrayal had come from close to home. And as investigators began to piece the story together, the picture that emerged was one of trust shattered, loyalty twisted into resentment, and a friendship that ended in gunfire. It wasn't long before investigators began to hear the same whispers that had already been spreading across Lumberton. The talk of a Facebook like, the jealousy it stirred, and the grudge that had been festering for weeks, all pointed in one direction. Every thread led them to the same name, Chamberlain Lee Oxendine. But investigators didn't move on rumor alone. They gathered accounts from witnesses who described the tension between the 2 men. They reviewed the timeline of that night and began to piece together who had been with Tazari and who might have had reason to want him gone. Slowly, a picture began to form, one that put Chamberlain in the center. Still, building a case would take time. Detectives knew that jealousy alone wasn't enough. They needed evidence that tied Chamberlain to the shooting on Beam Road. And for weeks, that gap left the Butler family waiting, desperate for answers. But the breakthrough finally came. On July 28, 2023, investigators announced that Chamberlain had been charged with first-degree murder in the death of Tazari Butler. The man once considered a friend was now named as the suspect responsible for his killing. Yet even with the charge, Chamberlain wasn't immediately behind bars. It wasn't until August 2nd, 2023, more than a month after the shooting, that he surrendered himself to authorities.
Breaking news now just into the WMBF newsroom. A man wanted for murder is now in custody. The Robeson County Sheriff's Office says Chamberlain Oxendine surrendered today. Deputies responded June 27th to Beam Road in Lumberton for a reported shooting. There they found Tazari Butler dead. Oxendine, again, is charged with murder.
And by then, the pain of waiting had already deepened the wound for Tazari's family, who were forced to live with the reality that the person accused of taking their son's life had been walking free while they grieved. For Tazari's family, the news of Chamberlain's arrest was both a relief and a fresh heartbreak. Relief because they finally had a name attached to the betrayal they had long suspected. Heartbreak because that name belonged to someone their son once trusted. His mother, Shauna Lowery, made her feelings clear in the days after.
My job as his mother is to always be his voice, to always make sure that my children are treated fairly, whether they're here or they're not.
She spoke about the pain of knowing her son's life wasn't taken by some faceless stranger, but by someone he felt safe around. It was betrayal in its purest form, one that left scars far deeper than the bullets ever could. And soon enough, that betrayal would be carried into a courtroom. As the case moved forward, Chamberlain appeared before the court. On December 19, 2023, a judge found there was enough probable cause to send the case to Superior Court. Prosecutors argued that this wasn't a crime of passion or an accident. It was deliberate. They described how the tension between him and Tazari had built for weeks, how jealousy had hardened into resentment, and how that resentment finally exploded on Beam Road. However, the defense had its own story to tell. Meanwhile, Chamberlain's lawyers pushed back, attempting to cast doubt on the narrative. But no matter what was said in the courtroom, the community could not ignore the facts. Tazari Butler was gone, and the man accused of pulling the trigger had once been close enough to call him a brother. And the legal fight was far from over. The fight for justice stretched into the following year. On February 29, 2024, Chamberlain's attorney filed a motion for bond, hoping to have him released while the case was pending. But the judge denied it, citing the seriousness of the charge and the risk he posed. Chamberlain would remain behind bars, awaiting trial. For Tazari's family, it was a small victory, but one that came with its own heavy truth. For Tazari's family, the decision brought a measure of comfort. At least for now, they knew the man accused of taking their son's life wouldn't walk free, but comfort didn't erase the grief. Because no matter what happened in court, one fact could never be changed. Even months later, reminders of Tazari were everywhere. His music still played, his daughters still asked for him, and his name still carried weight in Lumberton. To his fans, he was Lil Jabo, a rising artist with a promising future. To his family, he was simply Tazari, the son, the brother, the father who should have had so much more time. And while the legal process continued to unfold, the community's grief only deepened. On the day of his funeral, crowds gathered at the Colvin Funeral Home Chapel on 1904 Elizabethtown Road in Lumberton. Friends, family, and fans filled the chapel, paying their respects to a young man whose life had been cut short before he could reach his full potential. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow, but also filled with love, as those who knew him best remembered his kindness, his music, and the way he cherished his daughters. From there, his body was taken to Meadowbrook Cemetery in Lumberton, where he was laid to rest. His final resting place became a point of pilgrimage for loved ones and supporters alike, a quiet reminder that even in death, his story would not be forgotten. But the case that surrounded his death remained unfinished. As of now, no trial date has been confirmed. Chamberlain Lee Oxendine, the man accused of betraying Tazari's trust and pulling the trigger, remains in custody, held without bond, as the courts prepare for what will be a long and painful fight for justice. For Tazari's family, the wait is agonizing. Each hearing reopens old wounds, and each delay feels like another reminder of what has been stolen from them. Yet they continue to show strength, determined to see justice served in the name of their son. The loss of Tazari Butler left a hole not only in his family, but in his community. His music still echoes through speakers, his memory still lingers in conversations, and his daughters will grow up hearing stories about the father who loved them more than anything. And while the legal process continues to unfold, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more stories like this deserve to be told.